Okay, and the last one, Catawba County. Numbers are a little bit better. You still have this loss of 25 to 34-year-olds, but it's 15%. That's still a lot, that's 1 in 6, but it's better than 1 in 4. And the school age is actually up. Why is that? And I think that has to do with who's coming to the county. Remember we saw that chart that showed Hispanic growth and Asian population growth? Those families tend to have more children per household. So that has kept the numbers up some. Now if you look at the last couple of years, they're pretty flat. But if you look at it over a decade, it's going to be up a little bit. 60 to 64, 62% increase. So again, that's a business opportunity there. Any questions about the age groups? Yes.
Generally speaking, what are the counties doing to change the focus of the services they provide, given the way the ages are right now?
Very good question. Anybody like to take that question? Don't be shy. Okay. I'll try to take a stab at it. My guess, each agency is looking at this and they're trying to figure out what services that they're going to provide. If you look at areas like DSS and you look at areas like public health, and even if you looked at areas like workforce development, this is a group that they're going to have to deal with in terms of what services, what medical services is that group going to need. The demographics of that older group, we have a lot in that group that are what I would call they're right on the edge. They're very close to the poverty level or maybe a little bit above it. They haven't necessarily gathered a lot of wealth in those years. So they're probably going to be relying more on public health and DSS services. So they're going to have a difficult road to go in the next 10 years, while at the same time, from a couple conversations I've had with them, of course their federal funding, state funding's been cut, so they're getting more demands at the same time their funding's being cut. That's pretty tough. But we try to share this with all the groups, so in terms of planning in the future, they can say, okay, we've got a lot of retirees that are coming forward. How are we going to handle that as a community and as a local government? Did that help?
In some respects, you may not be able to answer this for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to arm wrestle you about it. Specifically about Burke County, are there changes in terms of what they're doing in school construction versus public health geared towards an aging population?
Well, that's another good question. Anybody from Burke County here? We've shared this with the school. It was actually, let's see, it was Burke County Tech Prep, and we've done a couple of presentations for their Rotary groups. And there were some people at the Future Forward Economic Alliance presentation in Morganton from Burke County. They've got a pretty tough situation, you're right. They've got to deal, let me see if I can get to go back here. All right. They've got a pretty tough situation, just to be honest about it, because you're seeing declining enrollments. These numbers should lead to declining enrollments. So what do you do with aging schools or schools that are underutilized? Do you keep them? What sort of logistical issues are you going to have? What are the issues with closing some of those schools? At the same time, they've got this group that's getting older and is going to demand more services. They're going to need more services. It's a pretty tough situation. So they've got to deal with both at the same time. It's not a very easy situation. I'm not trying to be negative on Burke County, but it's just that's the situation that they're facing. You've lost jobs, baby boomers are getting older, and your school enrollment has dropped some.
What if you're a school teacher there? That's, if you're a school teacher in Burke County, you're sitting there worried about if you're going to have a job here in the near future.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough situation. Class sizes are getting smaller. Of course, money is allocated based on the number of students. If you lose enrollment, you're losing that allocation.
I think you have to include the fact that the state legislature changed the maximum class size too, to help overcome some of the I think it's 17 students in the elementary.
Right, K3 has been reduced, middle and high school has gone up. Right now for high school, it's 34. The reason why I know this, my wife teaches at North Lincoln. She's going to have a class of 34. They allow you 10% over. She's probably going to have a 34 and 2 37s this spring. So they are, at least at her school, they are maximizing. Yeah. So she's going to have a busy few months, for sure. But yeah. So K3 is dropping, but the others have actually gone up a little bit. Any other questions about the age groups? Okay. And keep all this in mind, because at the end, we're going to have kind of a question for discussion that's all been related to these numbers and how we go forward. So kind of keep everything in the back of your head. Household composition. All right. Number of persons per household. Again, this is for the region. Look how high it was in 1970. It was 3.28 persons per household. Then by 2000, it was down to 2.5. And actually, for the region, went up a little bit between 2000 and 2010. Why has that dropped?
Less children.
Less children.
Divorce.
And I would also argue more older residents living alone. Households of one. Whether it's younger people who haven't gotten married, or they could be divorce days, or older, one of their spouses has died and they're living in their house. And fewer children per household overall. Those are the biggest factors. It's interesting that in the region it actually ticked up just a hair. It's still about the same as it was 10 years ago. There actually is a little bit of evidence that you're seeing children who they get out of school and they can't find a job, so they're going back to living with their parents. And that's probably kept it from going down a little bit more, where they might be by themselves or having to live with their parents because they can't find a job.
Another trend is that seniors are living with their children. You're seeing intergenerational families.
Right. And here's Catawba County, and it's fairly similar, again, right around that 2.5. So you're seeing some families, but you're seeing, again, some of those seniors living by themselves. And if you looked at this 10 years down the road, where we would be at, it'll probably be fairly similar. My guess is it'll stay around 2.5. It might drop a little bit. It's being tugged by economic conditions versus people waiting longer to get married and older individuals deciding to stay in their own house. Okay, we got a lot of numbers on this chart too. This is household composition here. So basically I'm trying to look at how many households have children under 18, how many households have individuals over 65. We'll start with that part first. Not surprisingly, this has gone up a lot. 30,000 households to 40,000 households. That's a 28% increase. Again, from a business standpoint, this might be an opportunity because you've got more seniors, more households with seniors. Households with individuals under 18, flat. It's about the same as it was 10 years ago. Group quarters. What's group quarters? Group quarters would be things like nursing homes, prisons, dormitories. They break it down into whether it's institutionalized, which means you have supervision, like prison. Non-institutionalized would mean less supervision, like a dormitory. And you see, they've gone up about 7 to 11%. A lot of this one here, this institutionalized, that has to do with the new prison in Alexander County. And it houses several hundred. And that's helped their numbers go up a little bit.
What about group homes? Is that kind of
Group homes would be counted as mostly institutionalized. It depends how much medical supervision that they're getting. If it's something like assisted living and the nurse is only coming in there occasionally, they're not so supervised. It would be non-institutionalized. The closer they get more to what I would call a traditional nursing home setting with more constant supervision, that would be institutionalized. All right. Here's Catawba County's numbers. Again, if you look at households with individuals over 65, 27% increase, pretty substantial. Households under 18, only 4%, much slower. And of course, that ties in with the age group numbers that we just talked about. Okay, households by type. Again, from a business standpoint, you have to think about what's the makeup of these households near your business. And local governments are thinking about what's the makeup of households that I'm going to have to provide services for. So if you look at, it's kind of some interesting trends here. Husband and wife family and with children under 18, that's dropped 12%. Male householder, female householders with children, we've seen increases there. So you're having more single parent households. That's not surprising, that's following a national trend. You also see, this is kind of a strange one, non-family households. What does that mean? That means that you have people that are living alone. You have to have at least two, of course. And you see this householder living alone has gone up 16%. Again, I think that's some singles waiting longer to get married and older individuals living by themselves. And then you see that other non-family, it's gone up 14%. I think you're having some people that, because of the economic situation, they're staying in the same house, but they don't have any relationship to each other. Any questions about that?
How much do you think that has to do with the demographic shift, with the different?
I think there's two factors going on. One is who's coming in and what are their household characteristics. So the other part has to do with the economy. I guess there's three parts when I think about it. One's the economy, one's who's coming in, and one happens to do with the change in social patterns. I think you mentioned the increase in divorce rates, for instance. Well, that would mean if they have children, they fall into one of these two categories, of course. You're having less of this traditional husband-wife family, and you would think with the people coming in, I guess it looks like some have traditional, but some don't. Probably needs a little more research into it.
Is there a category like multi-generational, multi-families living in the same household?
Yes. If they have a relationship, they would, of course, if they don't have, if it's multi-generational, but there's nobody married, they're going to fall into one of these two because there's no marriage there. So if they're not married but they're related, they're going to fall into one of these two. And that may be that some of those ethnic groups coming in, that's the situation that it is. The only way they qualify here is they have to have a husband-wife marriage relationship. This is probably the most complicated graph. There's just lots of stuff you could get from it, and we need to do a little bit more research into it. But this is kind of one of those, it's like, this is interesting. At least I find it interesting. Hopefully everybody else finds it interesting.